want you to hit me as hard as you can.
How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
If you thought Christopher Nolan had gone as dark as a secret man cave with his Bat trilogy opener, Batman Begins, this scene proves he was not only just getting started, but was also causing a nightmare for the censors. Begins may have introduced us to a new, dark, and brooding Batman who uses his own fears to induce the same into his enemies, but the villains he dealt with in that movie don't compare to what The Dark Knight had in store. So dust down your newly pimped up Batsuit, ditch that Batmobile for a killer bike, and put a smile on someone's face with the Heath Ledger inspired classic that is 2008's The Dark Knight.
Why so serious?
After achieving very respectable, if not earth-shattering box office with Batman Begins, and after having established a new and more grounded Gotham City, the shackles were well and truly off Christopher Nolan to delve deeper into the pot of classic Bat villains and plot lines from the Bat universe. The first movie undoubtedly showcased very entertaining bad guys in Scarecrow, Ra's al Ghul, and criminal underworld mob boss Carmine the Roman Falcone, but needed to spend significant time in establishing and introducing Batman's origins and motivations for donning a fancy suit and beating up bad guys after dark. Therefore, what we have in the sequel is a proper look at one of his signature villains that had already seen some pretty classic incarnations in past comics, TV shows, and movies. The Joker.
And now, folks, it's time for Who Do You Trust? Hubba, 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 money, money, money. Who do you trust? Me?
Nolan and his writing team drew inspiration from the Joker's comic book movie debut in 1940 that depicted the villain as a cold-blooded maniac with an unnerving smile, who goes on two separate murderous rampages. They were also inspired by The Killing Joke, a 1988 graphic novel that delves into the Joker's origins and depicts him as a family man and failed comedian who suffers from one bad day that finally drove him insane. Sound familiar?
Stay clear of the closing doors.
They also drew inspiration from the 1996 series The Long Halloween, that tells the story of Batman's relationship with District Attorney Harvey Dent and his subsequent transformation into villain Two-Face. Before Batman Begins and its reinvented Bat universe was unleashed upon moviegoers in 2005, screenwriter David S. Goyer had actually written the treatment for two sequels that would introduce both Joker and Two-Face as the main antagonists. His vision was to have Joker turn Harvey Dent into Two-Face in the final film in the trilogy by scarring him during the Joker's trial. Again, the 13-issue comic book series The Long Halloween was used as inspiration for this story. After some tinkering with ideas for the narrative, the first sequel, The Dark Knight's production, was announced in 2006 with an initially hesitant Christopher Nolan back in the director's chair. It was also the first time the name Batman was omitted from a live-action Batman movie, with the raspy-voiced crime fighter himself, Christian Bale, stating that, "This take on Batman of mine and Chris's is very different from any of the others." With Batman's origins having been fully fleshed out in Batman Begins, audiences were intrigued to see what form the main villain would take in this iteration of the Joker. Nolan had his brother and co-writer Jonathan watch the 1933 Fritz Lang crime drama, The Testament of Dr. Mabuse, in order to successfully portray the Joker, with Chris Nolan stating that the film is essential research for anyone attempting to write a supervillain. This certainly paid off, as the Joker we see in the movie is as unhinged as they come. But Nolan did not want to diminish his threat to Gotham and Batman by spending time on an origin story for the character, instead wanting to establish his rise to power, stating to MTV News that, "The Joker we meet in The Dark Knight is fully formed. To me, the Joker is an absolute. There are no shades of gray to him, maybe shades of purple. He's unbelievably dark. He bursts in just as he did in the comics. The director also reiterated this to American media site IGN by stating that, "We never wanted to do an origin story for the Joker in this film. Because the arc of the story is much more Harvey Dent's, the Joker is presented as an absolute. It's a very thrilling element in the film, and a very important one at that. But we wanted to deal with the rise of the Joker, not the origin of the Joker." This worked perfectly in the movie with Joker's introduction in the thrilling IMAX shot opening sequence, an intriguing and suspenseful way to establish just how much of a threat he is in the movie.
What do you believe in?
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
While the overarching theme in Batman Begins was fear, The Dark Knight expanded upon this and extended the ending of that movie by using escalation to raise the stakes in the narrative. The director elaborated upon this by saying that things have to get worse before they get better, and displaying this by having the Joker be a catalyst for anarchy in a way in which no other villain could do for the storyline. The film also develops the relationship and initially friendly rivalry between Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent into the backbone of the movie.
Any psychotic ex-boyfriends I should be aware of? Oh, you have no idea.
With Dent's character becoming the emotional and sympathetic arc of the narrative, with his transformation into villain Two-Face. The title of the movie also references Dent's fall from grace, with him as the fallen White Knight. With the new dark and gritty world of Batman fully realized, and most of the principal cast members returning for the sequel, Nolan not only had to find an actor who could bring his own take to an already iconic character, he also had to recast one who was introduced in the first movie, Rachel Dawes. Katie Holmes was never fully welcomed, nor her work in Batman Begins appreciated by fans, so it's unlikely any bat tears were shed over her omission from the sequel. Holmes was actually due to return to the role, but turned it down to star in, Mad Money with Diane Keaton and Queen Latifah. Way to go, Katie. Maggie Gyllenhaal was therefore cast in the role, and although her character is largely a damsel in distress in the film, she is nonetheless somewhat empowered by her unwillingness to compromise her morals, and brings a more mature aura to the role. Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, and Gary Oldman all returned to their key roles, while other notable newcomers included Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent and Two-Face, with some excellent and gruesome visual effects work with his eventual villainous transformation, while Monique Gabriella Kernan and Ron Dean portray Ana Ramirez and Michael Wirtz as corrupt detectives in Gordon's unit. Nestor CARBONELL, best known for his role in Suddenly Susan and Lost, appears as Anthony Garcia, the mayor of Gotham City. Chin Han portrays Lau, a corrupt Chinese LSI Holdings accountant triad boss, while Eric Roberts plays Sal Maroni, an Italian mafia boss who takes over Carmine Falcone's mob, and Richie Coster portrays the Chechen, a Chechen mafia boss in charge of drug trafficking for the mob. Other notable inclusions to the cast were Anthony Michael Hall as Gotham cable news reporter Mike Ingle, and both COLIN McFarlane and Cillian Murphy return in their respective roles as the police commissioner for Gotham and the villainous but short-lived in this movie, Scarecrow. Most notably, however, was the casting of the Joker and actors such as Paul Bettany, Adrian Brody, Robin Williams, and Steve Carell, all publicly expressing an interest in the role. However, Nolan had been keen to work with Heath Ledger on a number of projects in the past, and even unsuccessfully approached him for the role of Batman in Batman Begins. After landing the role of the Joker, Ledger fully immersed himself in the psyche of the character, and in wanting to keep his portrayal as close to the tone of Batman Begins as much as possible. He described his take on the Joker as a psychopathic, mass-murdering, schizophrenic clown with zero empathy. In the movie, the Joker's white skin and red lips are achieved by applying makeup, rather than the traditional chemical bleaching as seen in earlier incarnations of the character. And he has a Glasgow smile to further emphasize his shady past.
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You wanna know how I got them?
Ledger was so immersed in the creative process that he spent a month living alone in a hotel room, working on the character's posture, personality, voice, and even kept a diary of the Joker's thoughts and feelings throughout the process. Ledger also referred to both The Killing Joke and Arkham Asylum for inspiration, and cited A Clockwork Orange and Sid Vicious as a very early starting point for Christian and I. But we kind of flew far away from that pretty quickly into another world together. Ledger's work on the film is undeniably excellent, iconic, and one of, if not the definitive version of the character. His work on the film was so mesmerizing and impressive that Aaron Eckhart recalls a conversation he had with director Nolan, stating that, "Chris looked at me and he said, 'Heath is doing something special,' and we all felt that way. When you have Gary Oldman, who's one of our greatest actors, and he's in awe of what Heath was doing, it showed what a performance Heath was giving." The subsequent early and tragic death of actor Heath Ledger from a toxic combination of prescription drugs on January 22, 2008, after filming had been completed, shocked the production and the world to its core. This led to intense speculation surrounding Ledger's death from the press, and numerous memorial tributes were also made for the late actor. His performance as the Joker will forever be an incredible addition to an already impressive and growing acting career. And as Nolan recalls, it was a performance that lives long in the memory. It was tremendously emotional right when he passed, having to go back in and look at him every day during editing, but the truth is, I feel very lucky to have something productive to do. To have a performance that he was very, very proud of and that he had entrusted to me to finish. Nolan dedicated the film in part to Ledger's memory. The score for The Dark Knight was again composed by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard, who delivered an iPod to Nolan during shooting that contained 10 hours of recording. The composers created a 9-minute suite for the Joker's signature theme, Why So Serious, that was based largely around 2 notes, with Zimmer gaining inspiration from bands such as The Damned and German electro-rock pioneers Kraftwerk for the piece. Zimmer also clarified that the main theme of the movie replicates what they created for Batman Begins, and also in trilogy closer The Dark Knight Rises, with 2 prominent and repeated notes representing both Batman's pain and guilt. While the movie was based upon familiar themes, Nolan managed to push the boundaries of filmmaking during the project by utilizing and embracing the IMAX format beyond what had been achieved before. Many movies have been shot using the IMAX 70mm format since Tiger Child by Canadian filmmaker Donald Britton way back in 1970. However, they have mainly been documentaries or IMAX-specific releases that were designed for the format. The Dark Knight was therefore the very first mainstream film to utilize the IMAX 70mm cameras, specifically the IMAX Mark III Reflex and the IMAX MSM 9802 cameras. And 28 minutes of the film's runtime was shot in the format. 4 major sequences from the movie were shot with IMAX cameras, including the opening bank heist and also the car chase midway through the film. The sequences look immense on a true IMAX screen, but prove to be somewhat distracting if you watch the movie on Blu-ray. For example, with the ratio changing when the IMAX sequences appear. You may also wonder why the entire movie wasn't shot using the IMAX cameras. But there were various factors involved with this decision. For starters, the cost of the film stock was greatly more expensive than standard 35mm. Also, the cameras were heavier and therefore more cumbersome for the production team to use. and compared to traditional cameras, they produced a loud noise that made recording dialogue very difficult. Also, the cameras had very short film loads that range from around 30 seconds to just 2 minutes in length. Nolan also shared his disappointment with not being able to shoot the entire movie in 70mm, stating that if you could take an IMAX camera to Mount Everest or outer space, you could use it in a feature movie.
Will you be wanting the back pot, sir?
Middle of the day, Alfred? Not very subtle.
The Lamborghini, then? Much more subtle.
There's nothing subtle about a man who dresses up as a bat and kicks ass in a city overrun by an unhinged lunatic and a villain with half his face missing. And we wouldn't have it any other way. So when it comes to the production design of Batman's vehicles, they're now entrenched in the new and more realistic and grounded aesthetic of the world Batman inhabits. But they're still not very subtle. The Tumbler's introduction in Batman Begins was awesome, and its subsequent destruction and transformation into the Batpod in The Dark Knight was a little bit special also. The Batpod, or Bat Cycle as it's been previously named, was first introduced in the 1966 Batman TV series in the form of a Harley Davidson with a sidecar, but was only used for the first season episode, Not Yet, He Ain't, and was later reintroduced in the 1966 Batman movie using a Yamaha Catalina 250. The bike was then utilized in the TV series from that point onwards. The Batcycle, or should we say Batblade, was also seen in the 1997 debacle that was Batman and Robin, with Alicia Silverstone's Batgirl riding it in what appears to be slow motion as they battle Arnie's villainous Mr. Freeze. The Batpod in The Dark Knight is first introduced in the altercation between Batman and the Joker, when an RPG fired by the villain critically damages the Tumbler. The Batpod is used almost like an escape pod, but is also equipped with dual front-mounted cannons, machine guns, and even grappling hooks. The vehicle would go on to be used in the trilogy closer by another classic Bat villain, but we'll save that story for our next video. The Dark Knight was released in the US on July 18, 2008 and set a record for midnight showings, earning $18.5 million from 3,040 theaters. Its midnight debut also earned the movie $640,000 from IMAX screens before opening on 9,200 screens across a record 4,366 theaters, whilst also setting an opening single-day record at $67.2 million, plus an opening weekend record gross of $158.4. The film's release went on to break further records and ended on a huge final gross of $533 million domestically, and a worldwide final number of just over $1 billion.
We hold the world ransom for $100 billion.
The movie also received glowing praise from critics and fans alike, with it being regarded as not only one of the best films from the 2000s, but one of the best superhero movies ever made.
We got you, you son of a bitch.
It has a Rotten Tomatoes approval rating of 94% based on 345 reviews, with an average score of 8.6 out of 10, with the website's critical consensus of the movie calling it dark, complex, and unforgettable. The Dark Knight succeeds not just as an entertaining comic book film, but as a richly thrilling crime saga. Can't argue with that. The movie is a modern masterpiece that is elevated by inspirational turns from actors who bring their A game to a tight script and showcases a director at the top of his game. Other franchises with similarly epic and successful Part 2s, The Godfather and the original Star Wars movies in particular, failed to stick the landing for some fans with their trilogy closers. So what does Nolan have in store for the next chapter? Oh, and if you thought Batman's new raspy voice was controversial, just wait until you see and hear what the next installment has lined up. However, that's a story for next time. Join us, same movie time, same movie channel.